Welcome to today's webinar. Without further ado, I'd like to just take a brief moment and thank you for joining us for the summer 2021 edition of NCOPE's Residency Services Town Hall webinar. I'd like to take a moment and hand things off to our Executive Director, Ms. Robin C. Seabrook.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon. I am Robin Seabrook, Executive Director of NCOPE. I'd like to welcome you all to the NCOPE Town Hall on Residency Program Services. NCOPE believes that town hall meetings are an excellent format for sharing essential residency program updates, resources, general information, and enhancements made to the program over the past year. If the pandemic showed us anything, it was there is ease by which everyone can participate in a virtual setting. We want to engage our residency community. We also appreciate greatly our educators, mentors, directors, as well as residents that make the residency possible. On behalf of the entire board of directors and staff, I welcome you today. And we are confident you will learn something new.
Thank you, Robin. I appreciate it. In terms of today's town hall goals, we have a lot of material that we hope to cover today, but I hope you'll find that the topics are more than pertinent given your relative roles and responsibilities as a stakeholder of the NCOPE residency process. First and foremost, we're going to recognize the audience that this session is designed for, and that's truly anyone that has any relationship to the world of residency, from future students and residents all the way to our most senior residency directors and mentors. In terms of our other town hall goals, we're going to review our organizational mission, goals, and responsibilities as an educational accreditor. We're going to define the key stakeholders associated with an NCOPE accredited residency. We're going to review the roles and responsibilities held by the resident and the director/mentor. We're going to demonstrate the resources available to residents and directors/mentors. We're going to review updates and pertinent information for all residency stakeholders. And last but not least, create a forum for discussion. And I'm going to hand things back to Ms. Seabrook one more time.
I did want to touch briefly on the topic of sexual misconduct, harassment, and discrimination in the workplace. NCOPE does have a position on this, as well as all of the OMP sister organizations. You can find this information as well as the open letter on the NCOPE website. And our sister organizations also have a similar letter that was created last year. I wanted to touch briefly upon the aim of a zero tolerance policy is to encourage staff members who have experienced harassment, bullying, and discrimination to come forward, make it more difficult for harassers and bullies to act with impunity, and allow remedial action to take place as quickly and effectively as possible. They not only serve to stop bullying, harassment, and discrimination in the workplace, but also promotes a better, healthier office culture where poor behavior is less likely to occur. If you experience this type of behavior, your first course of action should be to report the behavior to the human resource individual within the OMP practice or residency program. So we just wanted to touch upon that briefly, and information and resource is available on our website. Thanks, Chris.
Excellent. Well, with regard to NCOPE as an organization, we're defined by our mission and goals. And our mission statement, adopted in 2019, is improving lives and strengthening the profession through education. We have 4 goals that are related to our mission statement: to strengthen education and clinical experiences, for which residency actually falls under both. We hope to optimize the collection, use, and dissemination of data for the benefit of the profession, which I think you'll see has resonated throughout today's presentation. We also seek to demonstrate the value of NCOPE's services and role. And we hope you find this session valuable and relevant given your role within the orthotic and prosthetic profession. And last but not least, we hope to attract a more racially and ethnically diverse cohort of students to choose orthotics and prosthetics as a career, so the future workforce better reflects the population that it serves. Now, a common question that I get from individuals is, what is an accreditor? And an educational accreditor in particular is a quality assurance agency under which services and operations of educational institutions or programs, and this includes orthotic and prosthetic residency, are evaluated and verified by an external body to determine whether applicable and recognized standards are met. And the question that I often get once I identify what we truly are, an accreditor, is who's the stakeholder that we're most accountable to? And that ultimately is the public. That's right, the public. And I'm not just referring to the movie title. How do we meet the public's needs? Well, we ensure that education programs and its respective graduates meet educational standards to ensure that competent patient care is the ultimate outcome. Now, let's discuss the development of an orthotic and prosthetic practitioner. And the development of an O&P professional requires the collaboration of CAHEP accredited O&P schools and residency programs to enable comprehensive education. The lessons learned in an academic setting are complemented by real-world applications in residency, with the ultimate goal of becoming an independent, competent, entry-level practitioner.
How you doing?
As you sign in, please do remember to mute your microphone. CAHEP education. The O&P education program ensures students receive a detailed and consistent understanding of the underlying principles of O&P practice. The diverse faculty and makeup of the academic programs introduces students to evidence-based practice and interprofessional care models, in addition to the core tenets of clinical practice. O&P residency is something that the clinicians on this webinar in particular can truly appreciate, because it offers key real-world experiences with the goal of developing an independent, competent, entry-level clinician. And it can be argued that the O&P residency is the most relevant component in a practitioner's education, as it is intended to be a structured, immersive, real-world experience. Keep in mind that while an O&P residency is often a new graduate's first job within the orthotic and prosthetic profession, it's also the second half of a practitioner's education. Beyond residency, there's independent clinical practice and continuing professional development. Once a clinician becomes credentialed, it's important to recognize that ongoing professional development is important to staying current with clinical concepts, and that O&P skills will need to continue to evolve and grow beyond merely entry-level competence. Now I'd like to shift gears and talk a little bit about the residency stakeholders, as this presentation is going to be relevant to all of the individuals on this slide. In particular, we have the patient, the residents, the faculty, and of course, NCOPE. Now the patient, at the end of the day, remember that providing appropriate patient care is the ultimate goal of the residency. Without the patient, residency wouldn't exist. Now we have the resident, part learner, part employee, often a multitasker, and truly the future of the orthotic and prosthetic profession. Within the faculty of a residency program, we have the directors and the mentors. But it's also important to recognize that other patient care team members can shape the learning environment. A couple of hours with an individual that knows how to bill Medicare effectively is certainly time well spent, even if they don't have the letter CPO after their name. And NCOPE. And NCOPE is the accrediting body that defines and assures that graduates of schools and residency are ultimately competent. I want to take a few moments and introduce the team that comprises the NCOPE staff. Without further ado, allow me to introduce you to Mr. Eric Waters.
Hey guys, so my name is Eric Waters, and I'm Residency Program Coordinator and Accreditation Assistant for NCOPE. My email is right on the screen if you ever need to get a hold of me. So what I mainly do for NCOPE is I process all resident registrations as well as all residency completions. I also handle most of the state licensure verifications for both registration and completion, as well as verifications for employment. And if you ever need to request a verification or of completion, you can do so on our website, ncope.org. I also review and mark off all NCOPE tracker forms. Some of you may think it's automated, but that's not true. I do go in and I thoroughly review each form submitted just to make sure everything is in order. And I also create and oversee all NCOPE tracker accounts for the residents. And I will typically be the point of contact for most residents as opposed to mentors and directors. So if you are a resident, you can reach out to me if you're having any issues with your NCOPE tracker account as far as logging in, or some information is incorrect. If you have any questions regarding your current or future residency, you can also reach out to me. I'd be happy to help. And if you want to run a status report but are unsure how to, these reports can generate what NCOPE has received from you, what you're missing, if NCOPE received your transcripts, and all these great resources that we encourage you to use. So if you're unsure how to do that or where to locate them, feel free to reach out to me. Also, if you have any questions or issues regarding state licensure, I'll do my best to help. And finally, if you believe your residency is complete, but you have not received any email or certificate of completion, I can also help verify if you are complete and what you are missing if you are not complete.
Well, thank you so much, Eric. And you've already given a little bit of foreshadowing for some of the resources that we'll be discussing today, including the resident status report, which is new and improved. On that note, allow me to introduce our newest NCOPE team member, Ms. Claire Doyle.
Hi, I'm Claire. I am NCOPE's Residency Program Assistant. Some of my main responsibilities include reviewing and vetting the residency program applications. This is to ensure that all the mentors and directors meet requirements, that affiliates are set up if certain requirements for one site can't be met. So just make sure that those are all in place. I also monitor current accreditation cycles to ensure that residency sites hosting residents maintain an active status and are in good standing with NCOPE. I also verify that residency directors and mentors qualify under NCOPE standards in order to take on and educate residents at a residency site. And I also am responsible for creating mentor and director accounts in NCOPE Tracker and updating Tracker to reflect that residents are assigned to the proper directors and mentors. I'm also the best contact point if you are a resident and need to request a change of director or mentor, so I can vet them and make sure that they are good to go to take you on as a resident. And if you are a residency director or mentor and you have interest in becoming a director or mentor in an accredited residency program, if you want to host an accredited residency site, if you need a resident assigned to you or another mentor in NCOPE Tracker, and if you want to add mentors already accredited to the residency site.
Now, I'd like to hand things back to our Executive Director, Ms. Robin Seabrook.
Hi, everyone. Again, I am Robin Seabrook, Executive Director of NCOPE. I have a variety of responsibilities that are outside of the residency program services, but also include the residency program services. So I handle the governance side of NCOPE as an organization, but as it relates to the residency program, as you all can tell, NCOPE is an extremely small staff as compared to some of our sister organizations. There's 4 of us, and I do handle all of the payables and receivables for the organization. So certainly if you're a resident and/or director or mentor and you're trying to verify that payment has been received or hasn't been received, or did the check cash, or I'm having issues with the credit card payment going through, please do not hesitate to reach out to me, and then I can work with you on that. I also, in terms of for residency directors and mentors, not only the payable side, but if you all ever have questions and concerns of how do these residency standards align with either NCOPE's mission and/or our objectives, or if there's ever a standard interpretation that you need assistance or help with, I'm happy to assist with that. But as you can see, and Chris will be coming up next to identify what his role is and responsibility within NCOPE, but we certainly have a very dedicated and good staff to assist you with any of your questions related to the program services. So again, based on our size, if ever you reach out, I'm happy to also pass it on and have anyone of my staff assist you as well. Thanks.
And last, but hopefully not least, is myself, Chris Robinson, and I serve as NCOPE's Clinical Resource Director. And my responsibilities include project management and development of NCOPE's core initiatives and programs. So as I mentioned, the mission and goals earlier on, those define the programs and where my efforts are typically placed. I also provide training to residents, residency directors and mentors, and O&P educators about NCOPE's tools and resources. I'm also responsible for developing and executing data collection and analysis tools for academic, postgraduate, and clinical education data sets. I also foster and contribute to collaborative initiatives with sister organizations, including CAHEP, the American Academy of Orthotists and Prosthetists, AOPA, ABC, as well as BOC. And kindly reach out to me if you're a resident and you require a clinical educator's perspective regarding some aspect of your training, or you're a residency director, mentor, or administrator, and you need assistance with advertising your residency programs with OP ResCats, or you require a clinical educator's perspective regarding residency. Now, a common question that we're asked is, how do I contact the NCOPE staff? And there's truly 3 ways to approach this. You can use email, and our personal email addresses were listed on the previous slides, and also the NCOPE staff page, which is hyperlinked below. On that note, if you're ever thinking, I don't remember who I should talk to about a specific thing in the world of residency, just send an email to residency@ncope.org, and the staff will actually ensure that your inquiry is routed to the correct member. We can also be reached via phone during normal business hours. Those business hours are 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and our main phone number is 703-836-7114, and each staff member has a personal phone extension, which is listed on the NCOPE staff page, again, linked below. And finally, we have our contact form and contact page. And on this page, you can learn about our physical mailing address in case you need to send us something via the U.S. Postal Service, such as a check, payment, or transcript, UPS, or even FedEx. There's also a web-based form that automatically routes your question to the best staff member to address your concerns. If you're a resident or a residency director, even a future resident, I recommend selecting residency for your topic, and that'll get it sent to the right parties. Now, I'd like to take a brief moment and discuss the NCOPE Orthotic and Prosthetic Residency Standards. Please understand that the residency standards are what ultimately create the rules and regulations for the organization and residency programs. They are not a set of suggestions, but a set of minimum requirements that must be met by a residency program, its faculty, and the residents. And within our standards, there's a framework of mission, purpose, objectives, outcomes, and programmatic improvement within Standard 1. Standard 2 and Standard 3 are largely focused on the implementation of the residency program itself. Standard 4 relates to the faculty, the mentors and directors, and what they need to do. In Standard 5 relates to the residents and their responsibilities as well. It's important to recognize that complying with the standards not only ensures an effective learning environment for residents, but that the residents successfully finish their training and achieve competency and are able to meet the needs of the patients that are part of the public that educational accreditors serve. Let's take a brief moment and discuss the history of post-academic clinical experiences. And looking at our diverse audience, I can verify I have some individuals on this call who did receive their clinical experiences before 1991, and that's before NCOPE even existed. Prior to 1991, there's a requirement to attain 1,900 hours of experience to be eligible to sit the ABC practitioner exam for a specific discipline, whether it be orthotics or prosthetics. In 1991, NCOPE was founded, and the initial O&P residency model was defined, including specific required experiences related to patient populations and treatments. And in 1995, the American Board for Certification mandated that all practitioner level candidates complete a formal NCOPE residency in order to be eligible to sit their examinations. 2012 was a major step forward because at that point, NCOPE introduced the competency-based residency standards, requiring residents to not only attain experiences, but demonstrate a minimal level of skill in providing patient care. Our residency standards can be viewed at the hyperlink below at any time. I'd like to take a moment and discuss the notion of competency during the O&P residency. And I'd like to discuss competency using this metaphor, if you will, of ladders. An individual doesn't simply start as not competent and jump one rung to become competent in nature. It's truly more like the taller ladder on the right-hand side, where an individual may be a beginner, developing, advancing, competent, or they could even go beyond competent to proficient. And there's even a level of mastery, which I believe many of the directors have achieved. Now, a lot of folks ask, what does it mean to be competent? Competence is defined as having sufficient knowledge, judgment, and skill to provide appropriate treatment interventions. And it does not suggest an expert or mastery level of abilities or skills. Now, most mentors and directors at residency programs have achieved levels well beyond competence. And that's likely going to require considerably more than the 12 to 18 months spent during a typical residency span. For a clinical example, I like to discuss some prosthetic management. And at the end of the day, a resident that's truly competent should be comfortable fitting a patient who has a transtibial amputation. That's a relatively normal limb length that doesn't have any complex contours or challenges. On that note, a practitioner capable of fitting a complex PFFD case with a Van Ness rotationplasty is illustrated to the right-hand side. If you can fit that patient, you likely have a level of skill and ability well above and beyond competence. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the differences between 1995 and 2015. And for those of you that are thinking, those are somewhat arbitrary dates, where did you get those from? And interestingly enough, those are some of the eras that were featured in the movie Back to the Future. So if we go ahead and take a look at our little comparison slide, we can see that whether it was 1995 or 2015, residency lasted approximately 1 year for a single discipline residency, and there were required exposures that needed to occur throughout the residency. There's also an attestation process at the end where the residency director signed off for successful completion of the residency. But what happened in 2015, and actually 2012 when the standards were adopted, is the residency program, and the resident in particular, was required to demonstrate competency across all required devices. And there needed to be documentation to support that the resident was directly engaged in the care of patients with that particular device. That's the big difference with a competency-based residency. So now that we have this competency component in play, it's important to recognize that a residency is not complete simply by reaching the end date. If you make it to the end of your residency, whether you have a flux capacitor in your car or not, keep in mind that many things need to occur. To initiate the residency, there needs to be the submission of a registration form for each residency program. So if you're starting off with a 12-month orthotic residency followed by a 12-month prosthetic residency, NCOPE doesn't assume that you're going to automatically go back to back. A registration form needs to be submitted for both. And that registration form, there's going to be some supporting documentation that needs to come into play, including payment of the registration fee and official transcripts. On that note, if it is your second residency and you submitted official transcripts for the previous one, we do have those on file. The key part of a residency, though, is to have the resident participate in patient care under supervision. And this is supervision that needs to progress in nature. So they should move from a framework of direct supervision where they may be just observing or assisting before they start to provide independent care, and ultimately indirect supervision, where the resident transitions from the office where the mentor is to perhaps doing a hospital call at a remote skilled nursing facility, for example. Also, the resident needs to document the patient care experiences using NCOPE Tracker. And both the resident as well as the mentor and/or director, need to be engaged and create timely submission of quarterly evaluations and documents, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. Also, the resident needs to demonstrate all required competencies, and all parties involved, the director, the mentor, and the resident, even before they're certified, need to adhere to the ABC Code of Professional Responsibility. And missing any of the residency requirements can potentially delay the residency completion beyond the initial completion date identified at the time of registration. So you need to make sure that you tick all those boxes, but there's an easy way to double check that. We're going to show you some of those resources during this presentation. So let's focus a little bit more on resident responsibilities in particular. So with regard to the residency, we have a registration form listed on our website. The URL is pasted just below the actual image of the form itself. And in terms of documentation, I mentioned official transcripts are required. Those transcripts, in general, we prefer electronic transcripts, should be sent to info@ncope.org. And don't worry, we have this email address listed on the actual registration form itself and our website. On that note, if you're at a university that still relies on paper-based transcripts, they can be mailed to our physical mailing address listed on the contact page. There's going to be some other details that are needed to register as well, including the residency site ID, your residency director's name, and your residency director's work email address. But don't worry, the residency site ID that can easily be found using the new and improved NCOPE Residency Program Directory, which we'll also talk about in just a moment. The root of any residency, though, is participating in comprehensive patient care. Residents often ask at the beginning, how engaged should I be? And it should be at a level appropriate for your current skill level. Initially, the resident will be likely to observe and then transition into assisting and subsequently performing services independently. Now, with regard to supervision, I talked about this briefly, but there's a framework I want you to understand. There's direct supervision, where the mentor or director is in the same building as the resident. On that note, your mentor or director may even be in the patient care room with you initially, but within the same building is technically direct supervision. Well, indirect supervision is when the mentor or director is in a different building or location than the resident. So the resident actually may be staying back at the main office while the director goes off to an off-site clinic. Keep in mind, though, indirect supervision should not occur unless the resident has been deemed competent by their mentor for the specific interventions that the patients are coming into the office for. Also, that comprehensive patient care needs to include things like pediatric exposures, adult exposures, as well as geriatric exposures. And if you work at a facility that has a certain patient focus, for example, Hartford Children's Hospital, the residency director has a responsibility to create opportunities for that resident to rotate through other O&P clinics. And it may be a satellite office or even a completely different company altogether via an affiliation. This is very common for VA-based residencies, where the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs can be a very rich and rewarding learning environment, but they typically don't have access to the pediatric population. And also, the resident must be engaged in all phases of patient care. A resident can't just be good at assessments per se. You have to be competent at assessments, formulation of care plan, implementation, including casting, measuring, fabrication or directing fabrication, fittings and adjustments, follow-up, and even practice management. You truly need to be a soup to nuts clinician. Now, let's talk a little bit about the required competencies. And there's device-based competencies, which are focused on both the right and left-hand side of this slide, as well as technical competency. And for an orthotic resident, they need to demonstrate competency for the procurement of foot orthoses, custom AFOs, knee orthoses, KAFO, custom TLSO, scoliosis bracing, as well as upper limb management. While the required prosthetic competencies include partial foot and signs, transtibial, transfemoral, upper limb management, and postoperative care. And when we say post-op care, a lot of clinicians get a little bit nervous and say, we aren't working at an acute care hospital, Chris. But keep in mind, this could include things like shrinkers, which are often fit on an outpatient basis, or rigid removable dressings, which may not be applied until the individual is transferred to a rehabilitation or a skilled nursing facility. Things such as limb guards or immediate postoperative prostheses, these all fall under the realm of postoperative patient care. And also residents, whether they be orthotic or prosthetic in nature, need to demonstrate technical competency. And this includes some basic hand skills, as a lot of clinicians like to call it: cutting, buffing, polishing, gluing, directing fabrication, really anything a typical clinician might need to do with the patient waiting in the exam room, like bending out a sidebar to increase clearance towards the neck of the fibula. That's not out of line. Also, the resident must document all patient encounters with an NCOPE tracker, and all encounters greater than or equal to 15 minutes in duration must be documented. And an interesting question again is, a lot of folks assume it's just the time spent face-to-face with the patient, but it's not. Ultimately, an encounter includes the time spent reviewing the documents for the patient, the time spent in the room with the patient, the time spent in the back making adjustments, as well as the time spent discussing the follow-up visit with the front office staff, and even the time spent entering the note into the electronic medical record system or generating appropriate billing documentation. Now, those data points that we're going to have documented inside of NCOPE Tracker, they're not anywhere near as extensive as what you would enter into a chart note. Actually, all of them are based on fill in the blank fields and pull downs, things such as the appointment date, the patient's visit type, the patient's age and years, level of engagement, whether you have observed, assisted, performed, the device type and body segment, laterality, and even the ICD-10 code. There's a lookup. So if you happen to already have that ICD-10 code, you can easily pop it in. On that note, with regard to the fields, all are required except for two. There's two other fields you can enter data into, and you're welcome to. And this includes documentation of goals, as well as outcomes measurement. Also, there needs to be a submission of quarterly documentation by the resident. And if you're a research track resident, you're going to provide quarterly updates. If you're a clinical track resident, you're going to do a clinical track activity. This can include many things, such as a case presentation, a professional in-service, journal club moderations, CATs, or a presentation at a local or even national and international meetings are acceptable too. Also, the big forms that need to be submitted: the resident should be submitting the evaluation of the residency program and the evaluation of the residency mentor every single quarter. Even if you're working with the same mentor or you're working at the same office, it should be documented on a quarterly basis. Now let's talk about mentor and director responsibilities. And I'm going to focus a little bit more so on the key points. We're not going to flesh this out too much because I want to show some cool new tools for those mentors and directors. But the director or mentor has the responsibility of ensuring the resident's responsibilities and terms are clearly defined. At the time of the onset of residency, the program duration and work hours need to be stated. Compensation and benefits also needs to be delineated, as well as requirements for the completion of the residency. Because remember, the NCOPE standards set a minimum bar. It doesn't prevent a residency site from setting the bar slightly higher. Also, the director and mentor need to establish learning objectives and clearly identify the expectations for the resident on a regular basis. And also assess that resident relative to those defined learning objectives. The director and mentor also needs to maintain independent records of the residency program. But within NCOPE Tracker, it's pretty easy. You can run reports and also keep PDF copies of any completed residency forms. They're emailed automatically, or they could just be downloaded at the time of completion. And also logs of any meetings held between the resident and the faculty. The director and mentor also need to submit quarterly evaluations and documents, and this is every quarter. And it's important to recognize that these quarterly forms, whether it's the quarterly evaluation of the resident or the quarterly evaluation of the mentor, which the resident fills out, those are due no more than 30 days after that quarter's end date. The director and mentor also have the onus of documenting the attainment of competency for all the required devices. Remember, there were 7 orthotic competencies and 5 prosthetic competencies. So once the resident demonstrates the ability to provide a comprehensive skill for a specific device-based competency, they must document this using the competency forms and tracker. A common mistake that is made by residency directors and mentors is they fill them out at the end as though the resident wasn't competent at all until 3 days before their end date, amazingly enough. Keep in mind, you really should be filling those out once the resident has achieved competency. And if they achieve it during their first quarter, that's great. If it doesn't happen until 3 days before the end of the residency, that's also acceptable. But do bear in mind that that resident should not transition to indirect supervision and take that hospital call by themselves until they've been deemed competent for that specific device. And last but not least, and actually one of the reasons a lot of residencies get delayed, the residency director must complete the final eval of the resident. And this form reflects the entire residency experience and also is an attestation that the resident has met all requirements for completion. And if you're not the director, well, I'm afraid you can't fill that form out in NCOPE Tracker. So it needs to have the resident linked to the director in order for it to be completed. So what's new with NCOPE? And I know that's the reason a lot of you signed in for this webinar. And well, we have a lot of exciting things going on right now. One of the cooler things for the data guy, that is me, is we've had 1 million clinical cases in NCOPE Tracker. That's amazing. We also have 4,400 evaluations of the resident and 4,400 evaluations of the residency program. And the data, it's impressive. It ultimately informs the development of our residency standards and policy. It's enabled us for the first time ever to create comparisons across residency programs and regions. We also can identify normal values. I actually can tell you, what does a typical residency experience look like? And for those of you that are getting ready to type that question in and go, Chris, tell me, I'm actually going to host an entirely separate webinar focused on the data from Tracker. And it also helps us identify how residency education complements CAHEP, orthotic and prosthetic education in preparing individuals for their board exams. If you want to learn more about Tracker, there's a URL at the bottom. Now, as excited as I am about those 1 million clinical case entries, keep in mind, as the data guy, I have to stress that quantity must be balanced by quality. So NCOPE Tracker's had some updates. The system now provides residents guidance about data sets that may be incomplete or inaccurate, allowing the resident to more easily identify where they can tweak and improve their entries. It also allows us to map additional custom device types from electronic medical record data against the NCOPE Residency Standards. And additional tutorials have been created focused on data entry to ensure that we're getting the best possible data available. So while this is a huge milestone for NCOPE Tracker and NCOPE as an organization, we've even entered the realm of what some would call big data. Keep in mind that we need to combine quality and quantity to leverage some other technologies associated with big data, including machine learning and predictive analytics. So for our current and future residents, wouldn't you like to know how likely you are to pass your boards on the first attempt before you even completed your residency? That's a question that might actually be answerable, depending on how good our data gets. Now, the NCOPE Resident Status Report has been updated. So we've always had a report that enabled residents to log in and identify what forms has the NCOPE staff formally received. I'm pleased to say that now residency directors and mentors, as well as the resident, can request a copy of the status report. So we can answer questions like, hey, did the NCOPE staff receive my transcript from school? You could always email Eric, but to be honest with you, he's going to run the same status report you will to double check. You can answer that question yourself. Also, were my residency fees paid? Again, it's on the status report. What's my residency end date again? Well, that's on the status report too. Who's my residency director and what forms of the NCOPE staff formally received? All of that's on the status report. And how do you get to it? Well, all you need to do is log into your NCOPE Tracker account if you're a current resident, mentor, or director, and click on the Forms tool, and you'll see Resident Status Report. Once you run it, it'll even email a copy in PDF format to both you and the resident. Speaking of residents, we also have the Regional Resident Liaisons Network to help and guide you through the process of residency. And those RRLs, they're recently certified practitioners who successfully completed CAHEP O&P education programs in an NCOPE accredited residency. And did you know that there's actually 8 RRLs serving different regions throughout the country? And now more so than ever, they're going to be more engaged. They're going to be reaching out to you as a resident at the onset of your residency and throughout to check in and see if they can offer any input. So if you're a current resident, keep your eyes peeled for an email from an ncope.org email address from your personal RRL, and you'll learn ways to connect with them. And for those of you that maybe finished up one residency and are currently in another residency, or you're a mentor, a director, or heck, you just finished both your residencies, we have a new and improved resident networking directory. So if you're a future resident, you haven't even decided where you're going to do your residency yet, but you want to talk to someone who has, well, you can go ahead and reach out to them and find alumni that completed their training at a specific program. Plus, the database is indexed. You can search by program type, track, location, and clinical name. On that note, if you're on this call, feel free to type in the address in the address bar in a separate browser, and feel free to sign up, because we want our networking directory to expand, and you do need to opt in. So don't worry if you're thinking, I don't want to talk to individuals about where I did my residency site. Well, that's your right. But if you are willing to have a chat about where you did your residency, please do sign up using the link below. I'd also like to talk about OP ResCast application harmonization, and this affects future residents as well as the residency directors and mentors running the programs. Did you know that most future residents apply to multiple residency sites? Not a bad thing, but often the application timelines between those sites are not synchronized in nature. So you may find that a resident has to turn down a job offer because they're still waiting for a response from another site. On that note, application synchronization ensures that candidates can ultimately apply and have their offers extended on a consistent timeline across multiple residency sites. And this has been enabled not by NCOPE, but the Academy's hospital-based orthotic and prosthetic practice committee. And they developed an optional process that enables you to participate and synchronize your residency open and close dates, as well as your offer dates, so that there can be harmonization across multiple sites. On that note, if you want to learn a little bit more about how it worked during the previous cycle, or you want to opt in for the 2021-2022 cycle, please visit the link listed below. And also remember, while participating in OP ResCast is a requirement for residency programs, harmonization is optional, and it's coordinated by residency program faculty outside of the NCOPE organization. Now, for those residency directors and mentors that have been using the OP ResCast system, things have changed up a little bit. Keep in mind that now, in order to configure your programs, you're going to go to an environment called prelaunch.webadmit.org. And WebAdmit Prelaunch is where you build your residency sites. So program configurations can now only be built within Prelaunch. The link's listed right there. And this was implemented by Liaisons, the vendor of OP ResCast, to ensure that only live application data was visible within the main WebAdmit portal. Keep in mind, we also hosted a webinar on this subject. So if you're looking for more details, I have a YouTube link hanging out just there. And there's a nice 45-minute webinar that'll walk you through all the nuances. But for those of you that are saying, Chris, I'm just one of those lucky folks that gets to pick our residents, I don't have to build any configurations. Keep in mind that live applications, as well as the applicants themselves and email campaigns to those applicants, those are still at the normal website, webadmit.org. And also, something that we've had for a little while, but I encourage everyone to take advantage of, is we do offer one-on-one assistance with OP ResCast WebAdmit. So we're here to help. We recognize that using WebAdmit, especially the first time, can be challenging. And we want to make sure that the information you share with candidates is the best info possible. So in just 45 minutes, we can teach you how to configure a program and get it ready to share with candidates. As a matter of fact, the link at the bottom, the white text on the blue background, just give that a click. And you're welcome to go ahead and book an appointment and have it put onto my calendar. We'll go ahead and meet up. This is a complimentary service for any of our residency sites that need help getting their programs advertised within OP ResCast. On that note, if you're more of an independent learner, there's some red text, a hyperlink that will guide you to a set of video tutorials if you want to try to tackle it yourself. And I don't blame you. I'm a hands-on learner myself. We also have the NCOPE approved clinical mentor course, and it's now online. The course is offered periodically in a hybrid manner, and it consists of 4.5 hours of online lectures, 4 homework assignments, and 3 hours of live small group sessions. There's also a 25-question knowledge assessment at the end to prove you've obtained the knowledge needed to earn the recognition as an ACM. I'm pleased to say that fall dates for the ACM course will be posted soon, so continue to check back and visit the ACM info page. For the residency directors and mentors, we also want to bring out the fact that the residency programs are going to need to submit an annual report this winter. And you probably didn't know that submission of an annual report has been part of the NCOPE Residency Standards for several years. And KHEP education programs, they've submitted annual reports for over a decade using a standardized tool. And NCOPE is actively building a special tool for residency programs that's going to be rolled out no later than Q1 of 2022, designed to capture the number of residents that attended your program last year. How many of them finished on time? How many of them got jobs after the end of their residency? And also, what changes were made to the residency program to improve it? We also will be offering live webinar training sessions to walk program directors and mentors through this tool to make sure that they're comfortable. We'll go ahead and email additional information to those directors and mentors once it is made available. Also, I'd like to identify that the NCOPE Residency Standards are being updated. So the Residency Standards are reviewed and revised periodically to ensure they're reflective of current clinical practice and complement the current KHEP school education standards. Within those standards, we're going to have an initial draft version open for public comment, a minimum of 30 days once that draft's approved. So continue to check back to the NCOPE website because we want your input. If you're a resident, a residency director, or in any way involved with the process of educating future practitioners, we welcome you to offer your input. So keep your eyes peeled. Also, the O&P education programs, as well as NCOPE, need clinicians. That's right. Certified orthotists, certified prosthetists, and CPOs. You might have asked yourself, how do I make sure my opinion on the O&P profession is heard by the educators at the schools? Well, I strongly encourage you to serve on one of the advisory panels. All schools are required to actually maintain an active advisory panel that consists of practicing clinicians. Also, the schools undergo a comprehensive accreditation process every 5 years, and there is a formal site visit that occurs. We're actively seeking individuals to serve as site visitors and actually visit the O&P schools. And having a clinician's perspective, somebody who might not necessarily be a full-time educator, but somebody who spends most of their day seeing patients and maybe working with residents, we'd love to have your help. If you want to learn more about being a self-study reviewer or a site visitor, go ahead and click the link at the bottom of this page. On that note, I'm going to start sneaking in to the frequently asked questions, and I'll also have an opportunity to tackle some of the questions that are appearing in our chat window as well. So if you did have any questions pop up during this presentation, that would be a great time to drop them into the chat window. And you can send them directly to me, Chris Robinson, or you could actually post them for everyone. So let's go ahead and ask a pretty good question. What are the critical dates for my residency and what needs to occur? That can be pretty easily answered thanks to the Residency Timeline Report. So anyone can run a residency timeline report from the NCOPE website at any time. That's a public-facing link that I have listed on this web page. On that note, the timeline report can create unique timelines for a program, whether it's a prosthetic residency that's research track or a 24-month combined clinical track residency. It can create a unique report based on your real residency, and it'll identify what forms are due for each quarter and calculate the dates spanned for each quarter. Also remember, I get a lot of folks saying, Chris, how long is a quarter? At a university, an academic quarter is 10 weeks. Residency programs, they're not universities. And if it is at a university, well, keep in mind, residencies are calendar-based. 91.25 days equals 1 quarter in the world of NCOPE. Also, I get a lot of questions about what do I need to know about the required residency forms? So both the resident and the residency director and mentor have required forms that need to be submitted throughout. But one thing I just want to remind you about is an actual NCOPE staff member, Mr. Waters, personally reviews each form submitted. So while you may have hit the submit button on that form, please note that status report that we talked about isn't going to show that the NCOPE staff received it until roughly 2 days after it was submitted, because Eric, he gets the pleasure of looking at hundreds upon hundreds of forms every single month. On that note, if you're the director or mentor or the resident, you should maintain independent records. At no point should you be thinking, I don't know what I've done. This is an educational process. So the same way that you keep copies of your term papers when you're in school, keep copies of your completed forms. And also, I want to cover a couple of common mistakes. Keep in mind, a lot of residents submit a professional activity form for an in-service. They said, Chris, I went to a hospital and I trained a bunch of rehab medicine physicians on O&P. Professional activities include professional outreach, where you're teaching people who don't know what O&P is about O&P, so hopefully they'll choose it as a career. Those rehab medicine physicians and in-services, that's a clinical track activity, guys. And also, as I mentioned, directors, a lot of times will submit the fourth quarter evaluation of the resident, which doesn't have the questions about actually having the resident truly be done. So make sure your director submits the final evaluation of the resident form, please. Also, how does a resident get reassigned to a different mentor? Keep in mind that the resident has a one-to-one relationship between the mentor and the director. So only a single mentor or director could be assigned to that resident at a time. But when the resident logs in on their dashboard, you can see who your mentor is. You even see the last time they logged into the system too. And if you're a mentor or director, you can see all your currently assigned residents as well. And they can be very easily reassigned. If you're a resident, just fill out the mentor change form. And if you're the residency director, you're also welcome to contact Ms. Doyle by email and submit the request as well, including the resident, the current mentor, and the future mentor's names and email addresses. The last FAQ that I'd like to present to our audience, well, this relates to how do I make sure my residency is marked complete? And also, how do I make sure that all my documentation is done so I can sit my board exams on time? Well, let's tackle those as two separate questions. So first of all, remember the NCOPE staff emails each resident a confirmation of residency completion once all documentation has been received and an audit's performed. So if you're thinking, I finished my residency 2 weeks ago, but I never got an email from the NCOPE staff, you're probably not done. So the resident, as well as the director and mentor, they're going to have the responsibility and documentation. But you can always run that status report and double check what the staff does have on file and what they don't. And speaking of certification, I get a lot of folks saying, I'm concerned about getting all documentation in on time so I can sit that ABC exam by a certain date. What are the most common causes for delay? And I could tell you, failure to submit official transcripts. We prefer the digital ones, so have them sent to info@ncope.org. It's on the reg form too, don't worry. Also, failure to submit payment for a residency registration. If you didn't pay the registration fee, it didn't happen the same way if you paid tuition, if you forget to pay your tuition at school. Also, failure to log all clinical encounters can be a potential issue. Also, failure to submit all required forms from both the director or mentor or the resident in a timely manner, or failure to obtain the required patient exposures. We've had situations where the resident had 1,200 cases entered, but they were at a facility that didn't do any pediatrics. And they said, Chris, I've learned so much, but they didn't see a single person under the age of 18. They needed to actually spend some time with pediatric cases, a required population. Another thing to keep in mind is with regard to your end date of your residency, you have a 30-day grace period between the final day of a quarter or the final day of your residency to submit those forms. So if your residency director submits the final eval of the residency 45 days after your end date, the end date of your residency is going to change to 45 days later. And this can negatively impact your ability to sit the exam. So make sure that all parties come together and submit things in a timely manner. I'm going to transition over to our upcoming events, and there's really only one big event I want to bring up to everyone, the 2021 Residency Career Fair. Save the date, September 29th through October 1st. We're going to have educational sessions. There's going to be future employer meet and greet. So if you're a residency site and you're thinking about hiring a resident anytime between September 1st of 2021 through August 30th of 2022. We'd love to have you there. We're also going to work with our sister organizations, ABC, the Academy, and AOPA. But if you're a resident or future resident want to get in touch with prospective sites, it's going to be great. And we're going to post registration info to our website in the very near future. On that note, I'd like to transition over to our open discussion forum. We had a great question. If a resident takes time off during the residency, at what point does this affect the end date? Do we need to enter paid time off or sick days into NCOPE Tracker? Keep in mind that NCOPE Tracker doesn't have a specific form or tool for you to submit paid time off and sick time. As a matter of fact, we hope you get a little bit of paid time off. And if you're sick, we don't want you to go to work. Get better. On that note, the time frame will be impacted, and you should contact the NCOPE staff anytime you have a period of greater than 3 weeks of time where you'll be off. So missing more than that 3-week period of time over the course of a residency. Let's say you had to keep an eye on a loved one and you took 3 weeks of leave. That's a time where you need to reach out to the NCOPE staff, and we need to shift the end date. We had somebody say, so does performing an outreach presentation qualify as a quarterly clinical track activity? So if you present to a bunch of high school students, does that count as an in-service? No, because you're not educating colleagues that are actually providing services that complement O&P care. So your outreach presentation that teaches people about the world of O&P, that's great. If you're teaching to people who don't know about the profession and you're hoping to recruit them in, that's a great professional activity. If you're doing a session to educate people about O&P and you work with them in a healthcare setting and they're other healthcare practitioners, that's a clinical track activity known as an in-service. And we have a question, is the residency career fair going to be in person? Well, no, it will absolutely be an online-based activity. It has been for the past few years, and some of the people that participated are on the session now. Why do we do it online? Accessibility, ultimately. This is spanning 3 days. So having individuals take 3 days off to go to a single physical location, that's not only expensive on the NCOPE side, but that's expensive for all parties involved. So it's going to be virtual in nature and online. On that note, it will be delivered for the low price of free. So if you're a future resident, the cost is $0. And if you're a residency site looking for future residents, your price is the low price of $0 as well. Great question.
Chris,
So,
somebody asked about being able to participate in the residency forum for resident interviews.
So for residency interviews, is this referring to the events hosted at a academy meeting or a
No,
OPA?
the residency fair that you mentioned.
So the residency fair itself is a group forum. So when you have these conversations, you can have some direct personal messages between candidates and future sites, but it's not structured in a way to have full-blown interviews. Think of it as a meet and greet. If you want to arrange an interview, I'd wager your company has a structure in place to engage in that. On that note, you need to get all their application info. So hopefully you will have your OP ResCast application open up at the time so you can get their resume and all the other details you're going to need before you schedule that interview. So that interview should be occurring after you get a full formal application in OP ResCast. On that note, the fair, that's your opportunity to get your face and presence known to your future residents. And we got another great question, digital transcripts. What transcripts do I need? So if you've attended a master's level orthotic and prosthetic program, which would be the case for everyone since it's a requirement, we need official transcripts from your master's O&P program. Excellent question.
Are we able to go through each company's personal HR and apply through them and get their residency and everything taken care of? Or is OPRECAS required?
Excellent question. It is a requirement, period.
So I'm asking as a potential resident myself. So I've reached out to a personal company and they're like, we have OPRECAS, but we'd rather you just go through our HR department. Is that a viable option, or do I still have to, as a resident, go through OPRECAS?
So the OP ResCast system is a requirement within our standards. That
Okay.
site, feel free to direct them to me personally. My email address was listed on the slides and the website. I'd be happy to help them out.
Okay.
Well, that was a good clarifying comment. I appreciate you, Jamie, taking the time. On that note, I want a few moments over, and I appreciate all of you that are willing to stay on a little bit long. Thank you. On behalf of the NCOPE Board of Directors, volunteers, and staff, we are eternally grateful for your support of orthotic and prosthetic education. Your commitment to the students and residents of today ensures the future of our profession. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.